Black Scully on check. Got a little denim jacket on check. Welcome to another marvelous episode. On today's docket, is this the beginning of the end for the spring game? The spring game is something that I've loved and I've beloved for years. And as a credential member of the media, it's how I was able to build connection with schools. Going to the spring game, there wasn't a lot of media there. Built connection with the who's of these individual programs, and now it's sponsored where we're able to travel every week for games. Also on today's docket, Hard Knocks. It was rumored that it was headed to Chapel Hill to film Bill Belichick in North Carolina football, and I was all for it. I was ready for it on Overreaction Monday yesterday. We covered it. We was excited for it, and then today I hear that things fell through because of creative control and maybe the financial numbers weren't where they need to be. Lastly, on today's docket, ACC, FSU, Clemson, they reached a settlement agreement on the revenue distribution. It was a fight. It was something major ACC Media Days last year. I'm excited that they finally got these things taken care of. Only on Governor College Football, hashtag go CFB, CFB Nation, your only college football destination. Let's get it. Governor of College Football, we're going to recap ACC.
Hey, that's
Two great
CJ on
defensive
the
minds.
track.
They have to be better on that side of the spring game. Oh, the spring game. Oh, how I love the spring game. I think about the spring game and I think about the college football season is so short. And I think as much as we try to appreciate it, and you guys know my closing, there's no moral victories in a sport that survive and advance. And I think about how short the season is. It's like it starts and then it ends. That's what it feels like every year, from being completely transparent. But the spring season is that glimpse. It's like, I love pages like K Ford and Josh Pate. Like Josh Pate always every Saturday say, oh, we're only this amount of Saturdays away from the season start. K Ford always tell you how many days we are away from the season starting. But the spring game kind of gives us that, okay, where are we at? Where are these programs at? How these incoming early enrollee freshmen looking. If there's an ongoing quarterback battle, we're going to over dissect, how each quarterback played and who has the lead on the depth chart heading into fall camp. And it's just so much idiosyncrasies I love about the spring season. So we have two schools of thought as it pertains to the spring. Last season, Ole Miss didn't have a spring game. It was something that wasn't really covered by a lot of people. But when you start thinking about it, it's like it's a trend this year. And Matt Rule spoke on it. He was like, listen, the tampering that happens after you have a couple kids they put on a really good show in that spring game, it's not worth it. He also stated that, if you have a new offensive coordinator or you're installing something that's new offensively, why would you want to put that intel out on film and the teams are able to study that and prepare for you? That's one school of thought, and I truly get it. Like we saw the Caden Proctor debacle last year with him leaving Tuscaloosa, heading to Iowa City for spring, you get the portal, and then in the late session, he headed back to Tuscaloosa. It was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, and it gave us a lot to talk about last year. But I understand the tampering aspect of why a lot of coaches and why a lot of schools say, hey, we don't need a spring game. We'll just put on a nice event. It'll be something good for the fans. They can still come out and support. It's something that's free. That's amazing. The other school of thought is my school of thought. Like the spring game, I'm a traditionalist. The spring game is amazing. Like I remember my very first spring game. I went down to Death Valley, Clemson, their spring game 2023. And it was just dope to be a credential member of the media. It was dope just like being on the field, watching and seeing how everything goes. It was super cool seeing Dabo Swinney loves spring games, by the way. It was super cool seeing him in his element, seeing him with the ACC network. And while he was talking to ACC network, he was also entertaining the fans, from the mic. And his assistant head coaches were able to coach each side during the spring game. But you got to see players like, okay, this kid can be pretty good. That's why I love the spring season. Like, and shout out to a website like Our Lads. They do a great job with depth charts, and these spring games really help with that. These spring camps really help with that. And whether these programs like it or not, I think the list is Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, so a few other programs I have in spring game. But whether they like it or not, that information is going to get out. What's going on in these practices is going to get out. Who's the head of the depth chart, that information is still going to get out. it's not the same amount of intel as seeing film because, I've been to Virginia Tech fall camp and it's crazy there. Like there's times you're allowed to film. There are times when they will look at you and the SIDs will say, hey, I need everybody to put their cameras down. Anybody violates that, you're all leaving. And they don't play. And so that's when I know they're about to install something new. So I'm really paying attention to see what's going on. That's just the way it works. So like I said earlier, as a traditionalist, I really love the spring game. It just gives me like that, okay, we 5 and some months away from the greatest sport that there is. Do I understand why programs are getting rid of it? Yes. Tampering is huge in the sport. I don't think there's anything these programs can do. I don't think there's anything that the NCAA can do to prevent tampering. It's just the way that it is, especially when the sport is such a clout-driven sport. You got, 17, 18-year-olds, high school, they're the man where they're at, early enrollee, going to college, and they find out, oh, this is real. Yes, you got the bag. Yes, you got the clout. You know what I'm saying? But you might be unhappy. The recruiting process doesn't stop after somebody signs their letter of intent. It's an ongoing thing. Like I mentioned Caden Proctor earlier, it's an ongoing thing. So, of course, somebody may be in your DMs, hey, everything going okay? You happy there? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the way it works. So, like I said, I understand both sides, of the fence. I understand the two schools of thought. But, at the end of the day, I wish we would keep spring games. It is what it is. It's unfortunate, but, I get also the other side of it of not wanting to put a lot of that intel out. And then the tampering of somebody who's probably, I don't want to say buried on the depth chart, but could be buried on the depth chart. Go. Had him assist a wide receiver, had 3-4 catches, make a splash, and then all of a sudden, schools is in their inbox, and guess what? They're going to hit that late window transfer portal. That's just the way it works. Let's move on to the next segment. ACC, Clemson, Florida State. They reached a revenue distribution agreement. I think that in order to tell this story properly, last year at ACC Media Days, I was there. Shout out to my guy, Jim Phillips. I don't know him on a personal level, but he knows who I am. And, of course, he's Jim Phillips. I know who he is. So every time he sees me, he makes sure he shakes my hand and asks me how everything is going. And I love that. I seen him. I think last time I seen him was at the ACC Championship. Clemson FSU game. He said, hey, how's it going? And I love the embrace. Also see my guy, Skip, who's Trip, who's the master of ceremonies for ACC Media Days. But ACC Media Days, I've always seen Jim Phillips as a button-up guy, soft-spoken, but you can tell he's fierce. But, like, he used some very strong vernacular, very strong verbiage at ACC Media Days. And he made it plain and simple. He said, this agreement that we all have with ESPN to 2036, he said, these schools signed not once, but twice. He said nobody forced them to sign. So and this is kind of what he said in his opening remarks. So he let it know right there that, the ACC wasn't happy with either one of these schools. But I think in the end with this agreement, I think it works really well for all parties involved. And the reason I say that, I think at one point it was roughly estimated that it would cost $700 million for these schools to leave. Granted, some of these newer conferences, you look at where Clemson is located, from a geographical standpoint, you look at where Florida State is located. Conferences that are looking to expand will love these programs, not only from what you get from the football departments, but the other athletic departments. They will be huge gets, but ain't no school helping out with that $700 million exit fee that it was. Now, I think things are a little bit more reasonable. After the math, all told, the new agreement up until 2030, because then there'll be something else, they will be able to leave for about $120 million. I think that's a little bit more feasible. So if Big 12 wanted to court Clemson and wanted to court, Florida State, they may be willing to go half, like, hey, we'll help you, pay your exit, fee. That's a little bit more feasible than $700 million is bonkers. And then it goes down to even less. I think by the time 2030, 2031, the exit fee is only $75 million. Why I think this won't keep Clemson and Florida State forever, I do think that this agreement helps from a few standpoints. It'll keep them there from the interim. ACC is 18 teams strong. The ACC was able to field two schools in the college football playoff last year in SMU and Clemson. And I think for the interim, I think this relationship can be mended. I can't wait for the upcoming ACC Media Days to kind of get a glimpse of how Clemson is truly feeling, how Florida State is truly feeling, and asking some of their members of the media. They may have some intel on it. So I can't wait for that. But for now, I think this kind of, it's not swept under the rug, but it kind of like things are okay. I'll be interested to see what happens in 2030, 2031, because, we may see a few schools leave around that time period if the ACC can't generate more money. But you got to wait all the way to 2036. Don't know why they signed such a long agreement with ESPN. But when you look at other conferences, like the other conference, that's the SEC for anybody who don't know. I call that conference the other conference, and I have my reasons. And then also, if you look at the Big Ten, what their schools are getting with their TV deals, they're getting a lot more than what the ACC is getting for their TV deals. Let's move on to the next segment. So, it's a hard knock life. I was interested to hear about this. We covered it yesterday over Reaction Monday, and the talk was, okay, they're going to Chapel Hill. And I was like, okay, my first thought, I'll be excited to see what traditionally blue blood program would it be like with the NFL Films crew there to film Hard Knocks. I also thought that the access at the collegiate level would be a little bit better because, NFL players, they have homes. Sometimes they go into their homes, but for the most part, they're either on the field or, at child. Other than that, you don't really get to know them. Here, you'll be able to see them in the locker room, see them at the dormitory, this, that, and the third. So I'm excited for this show to be at the college ranks. And I think this show will be even better at the college ranks. So now that the North Carolina thing fell through, who are some programs I personally would like to see on the show this year? I think Texas will be incredible to see. We kind of saw Notre Dame last year with the show that they had on NBC and them being covered, and it was kind of pretty dope that they end up being in the national championship this past season. So I even though it's such a rich school, such a rich tradition, I'm not sure if they would be the best fit, being that this was just done there. Should it be a juggernaut like Ohio State coming off a national championship, and what it's like to be in Columbus, following that championship and trying to do it again? Could they go follow a team like the Michigan Wolverines? Absolutely. What type of tier team do I think they'll follow? I think they'll want to follow a team with a decent enough storyline, but also a team or a program that's not as big maybe as it once was. I would love if they went down to Coral Gables and filmed them in Miami. I would love if they went and filmed a team like Nebraska to see what's really going on in Lincoln. They're not having a spring game. But then again, Matt Rule said, hey, I don't want this type of intel out. So it'll be interesting to see what the Hard Knocks crew decide. But I think we will get so much more intricate content at the collegiate ranks than we would at the professional ranks. As I always like to say, there are no more victories in a sport that survive and advance. That's why college football has the greatest regular season. And until next time, y'all already know what it is. Take care. One. Governor of college football, we're going to recap ACC.
Hey, that's CJ
defensive minds. They have to be better on that side of the ball.